This is the unrestricted free agent.
The Jimbo Fisher stuff. Were you in the room the other day when he threw?
Was. Part of the reason we had so much fun being Clemson was because we used to talk a lot of shit to them and they couldn't handle it.
You feel fine, but your hands are shaking.
Coach Spurrier couldn't give a damn.
I want to take these athletes and mentor them.
Why can't the Gamecocks win at the SEC tournament?
So sunny all the time, so hot.
Too sunny.
Too sunny.
Fans are going to be fans, and people who understand the sport are going to talk sports.
With some weird dynamics.
It's going to be painful, but I think at the end of the day, we'll be stronger people for it.
Build up to the start of the Wednesday program. Thanks for your patience. Getting rolling. Little extra pre-roll music for you on your Wednesday morning. 2 slides last night. That highlights my thinking coming into today. 2 slides in Major League Baseball. I'm not being metaphorical and talking about teams dropping back in a race or anything. I'm talking about literal, physical slides. 2 guys, completely different takeaways from last night. And don't worry, we're going to get into Gamecock football. Going to focus on wide receivers today, and who knows where else the show will go in a couple hours. Thank you for joining us on the live stream this morning, 8 to 10, Monday through Friday. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, where the video live stream pops up, and then you get the streaming audio on Podbean. Pops out all over the place as a podcast after 10 o'clock. DC, first one in this morning. Anthony, saying a good morning to all the UFAs out there. DC, Craig, Conster, Chris. How are you guys this morning? Double digits now in August. That much closer to football season. 24 days away if you're doing the countdown for Gamecock football specifically for the September 3rd kickoff across college football. And we'll talk plenty of college football. Relatively quiet day. Again, no news is good news this time of year for a football program. Where some offensive players speaking yesterday, I would suggest to you, I would submit to you, not the headlining names for the South Carolina offense this year, but we'll get into some of the comments from yesterday. I got to start. Jackie Bradley Jr., first of all, is right up there as the gold standard for Gamecock baseball. When you win College World Series Most Outstanding Player en route to a school's first national championship, when you had the hit that kept your team from being eliminated early on in that College World Series. And then you go on to Major League Baseball career where you're an all-star, where you are a just gifted, I don't know how else to say it, a gifted defensive player. You got a cool name like Jackie Bradley Jr. You have a personality like Jackie does that is just easy to like. Affable, I think might be the right word. Unflappable, maybe. You win an ALCS MVP a couple of years ago. You play in Boston to begin with. You got all those things going for you. So Jackie is later on in his career at this point. And, right? I read it out the other day. Whit Merrifield, who also recently got picked up by the Toronto Blue Jays in a trade with the Royals, is now 33 years old. I think Jackie might be a year behind him, but the last couple of years, not quite what he has been in his career. And Red Sox released him recently, and now the Blue Jays signed him to a 1-year contract. So he gets another chance to prove himself, I'm guessing, in a platoon/fill-in role with the team that is leading the way in the AL wildcard right now. And a guy who was with the Milwaukee Brewers the last couple of years, I believe it was, after being with the Red Sox most of his career. So Jackie Bradley Jr. and Whit Merrifield kind of reuniting in Toronto, and they have a chance to make a postseason run. now that we're 12 years past that first national championship, Jackie, big reason for the second one, 2011 as well. But it was a couple of slides, and it was his old team last night where the Braves were playing up at Fenway. And what a game that was. Atlanta ended up beating Boston in 11 innings, 9-7 the final score. Mets also a winner last night, so still a 6.5 game lead for New York in the AL, or the NL East, excuse me. Did you see this slide? Ronald Acuna is, we all understand, he's just different. Right? Did you see the home run derby where they're being introduced? He's up on the stage and some fire goes off behind him and he freaks out. Just physically reacted like, hey, that was way too close and I almost caught on fire. And he's an energetic, dramatic kind of guy. And so I don't have the Valley Sports deal on my YouTube TV, so I wasn't watching the game last night. Blocked out on TBS as well on the YouTube TV. Thank you, MLB. Bitterness here. But keeping up with it on Twitter, which is, I've come to just get used to seeing the highlights, which is okay. All right. I'm not going to complain about it. So I see it pop up that going the electricity from Acuna, you could, I don't know, power a city by or something. I forget what it is. I forget exactly what it was up on. I think it was on the Valley Sports account, and they just popped up scoring from first base relatively late in the ball game on a shot. I think it was Dansby Swanson ended up popping one right past the second baseman in between the center fielder and right fielder. They ended up cutting it off, didn't even let it get all the way to the wall, but Acuna was stealing on the play, ended up scoring from first. But a relatively standard baseball play, but really exciting just to watch Ronald Acuna run. Maybe it's a throw, just barely, but not nearly as out of the ordinary as what we saw in the 11th inning, where, again, he's scoring as runners to second and third, tie game, base hit to left field. So his run is the 9th run of the game to put Atlanta up to. Not technically the winning run, but if you guys haven't seen the video, I suggest you check it out. And here's a still shot from the Valley's broadcast of how he goes from outside of the baseline. The throw is on the outside as well. So he's taking all this in at top speed, comes all the way inside, head first slide as far inside as he can with his hand just barely touching the inside corner of the plate underneath the tag. Absolutely incredible. The picture does it, the still frame does it no justice here. I don't think it's supposed to play the video. So you had that one in the incredible, just jaw-dropping. How did he do that? Chris saying if that was Jackie out in center field for the Red Sox, he would have been out. Chris, make some heads up. His audio is a little bit muffled here. See if I can make that adjustment. So before I continue on my Gas Baggy hot take rant here, we'll make an adjustment. Play a little bit of we'll do the Gamecock Plus segment. So tonight, Carolina's going to be behind the scenes, ESPNU, 7 o'clock. We'll talk more about that in a minute. This is my buddy Dakota Watson. I guess it's about a week or so ago at this point now, was telling us about the Gamecock Plus that's going to be offered for Gamecock Club members. Then we'll see if we can take care of that audio issue.
We'd ask our questions, and Lou Holtz would say, all right, anything else? All right, you guys turn off the cameras. I got a story for you.
Oh, my God.
So you're talking about being genuine in the whole thing. This was the old era of, hey, here's the public version.
Yeah.
Here's the behind-the-scenes stuff that only you guys get. And now we're fast-forwarding not even 20 years, and it has changed so completely.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, turn the camera back on and come closer.
Right.
And let me show you behind the scenes of what this is like.
Let's see. Any better now? Still not sure why that's muffled sometimes. I think it's a connection issue on the YouTube. When I listen back on the audio version, typically it's always clear. So appreciate your patience on that. Instant comment from Chris back. Good. Thank you, Chris. This is my audio engineer this morning. So you got the Acuna slide helping the Braves to win in 11 innings. Tremendously athletic play. A team that is definitely right in the middle of a postseason run. You got the Red Sox up there trying to be relevant, but it doesn't look like they are this year. But Fenway, the most historic venue in baseball, maybe Wrigley, if you want to fight me on that. But it's the other slide in baseball that will be will last longer, I think. The image will last so much longer, and let me show it to you. Not Acuna slide, but this poor Pittsburgh Pirate dude. You guys, and I didn't even notice it the first couple of times I saw it, I think. You guys can check this out on the video live stream. See anything funny? That is a cell phone popping out of the dude's back pocket. Just called up from AAA, second-year second baseman Rodolfo Castro. Cell phone, back pocket, head first slide. Cell phone pops out of the back pocket. Oh, man. This was one. And the kudos to Norm Hall from Getty Images. One of the pictures of the year. Maybe one of the best pictures I've ever seen in sports. As the phone is coming out of the back pocket, as his hand is hitting the base. A phone popping out of a Major League Baseball player's back pocket. You guys know the old story, or I guess maybe rumor might be the best way to put that. What I would always heard about Tim Raines, the reason why he stole or why he slid head first a lot of times is because he would have something in his back pocket that he didn't want to break, and that was probably drugs. This is so massively embarrassing. And Castro, after the game, threw an interpreter saying it was a mistake, and no professional player should ever have that happen in the whole thing, and didn't want to be the center of attention. And his comments didn't help at all. There was no good explanation. Like, hey, there was a family emergency that I had to check on in the dugout, maybe, or my wife was having a baby tonight. I had to make sure everything was okay. Anything like that, to where we all would have been like, oh, well, it's still embarrassing. I get it. Nope, nothing. Just nothing. So that's Major League Baseball, but it was Little League Baseball dominating social media yesterday. I'm guessing you guys saw that, right? I mean, you want to feel good about humanity. You see this scene from a Little League World Series qualifier, still in the regional round. I mentioned it yesterday, how I had it on at my house, and I'm still a little bit torn philosophically with the Little League World Series stuff. It does seem a little exploitative, but my kids at 9 and 7 now, they're into it. I think they can learn some things. Clearly, I haven't shown them this yet, but I will. And I think maybe near everybody in America saw it yesterday. Oklahoma and Texas, I want to say. Oklahoma and somebody playing in a qualifier yesterday. Pitcher hits the kid in the helmet. Kid goes down. It doesn't look pretty because, man, you guys have seen these kids, right? Maybe it's because it wasn't always on TV, because I remember being a 12-year-old and playing in the Little League tournament. I thought our team was good, and then we hosted a team from Rowan County, North Carolina, and they were massive. and at a completely different level. So I think there have always been really big 12-year-olds and really athletic, good 12-year-olds that just might make your local 12-year-old team look hilarious. But there are a bunch of those right now in the Little League World Series, and maybe just because we're seeing them a little bit more. And so the guy was bringing it. Unfortunately, it got the kid in the helmet. It was not a pretty scene. Kid goes down, shakes it off relatively quickly, and it goes down to first base, takes his helmet off, and then you see the isolated shot of the runner at first base. It looks like he's, to me, when I first saw it, looks like he's yelling at the pitcher, right? And this is the last thing you want to see, especially in Little League. A kid that got hit in the head now chirping at the pitcher and them having a problem. But turns out he was just trying to get the pitcher's attention because the pitcher, we come to find out, is pretty upset on the mound. And I assume he's upset because he just hit a kid in the head. But give that kid on first base credit, man. He takes his helmet off and walks out to the mound, basically gives the guy a hug and says, "You're doing great. You're doing great, man." And then the pitcher's coach comes in, and I think they get the emotions under control, and there we go. Shows, I think, one of the moms in the stands, maybe the mom of the kid who got hit in the head, like crying, the whole thing. It's what's good about sports, man. It's easy to get bitter, and I was talking yesterday about the craziness of the world. Aaron Rodgers talking about ayahuasca and loving everybody, and the FBI is raiding former President Trump's house, and that's where we are. And there's still plenty of more probably ridiculous examples of how the world is going into a handbasket today. But that's on the other side. There are examples on the other side for sure. Wanted to start with all three of those things. Incredible slide. One of the best I've ever seen from Ronald Acuna. Was it massively important in that game, or was that game massively important? Not necessarily. It wasn't the winning run, but it does kind of sum up how easy the Braves are to watch and like, and Acuna especially. And then you got on the other end of the spectrum a cell phone popping out of a dude's pants while he's sliding in to a base in the major leagues. And then you got this great scene in Little League. It was like, it just, baseball is a pure game that way. And I notice it with my kids. There's something to it, man. You get a group of about a dozen kids together and you have baseball. It's hard to screw it up. Now, I'm watching. These coaches and parents can do it. But if you just stay out of the kids' way most of the time, like it's just an amazing game. And that was a great example of it yesterday, man. So we got that going down. Wanted to start with that today. Try to get everybody out to a good mood. Going to get into Gamecock football here in a minute. And who was it that just hit us up about, Craig talking about Turbo. Dante Miller is the transfer running back's name from Columbia, talking about the Ivy League yesterday. So a different conversation than you usually get from a Gamecock football player. We'll get to him in just a minute. But wanted to get to more news from yesterday. I get it that he talked yesterday, and Gamecock football is usually the headlining topic here. We'll talk about it mostly this morning, but important to mention that a federal judge in California has sided with the PGA Tour over the Live Series. It was 3 guys specifically. 11 guys total have sued the PGA Tour, saying that they should be allowed. It's an antitrust thing. They should be allowed to participate because of official World Golf points. Not having the chance to earn those is an antitrust thing, as I understand this suit. 3 of those 11 filed a temporary injunction, or filed for one, right, to be able to play in the FedEx Cup playoffs now. And that's why a federal judge ruled on this thing because of the immediacy of it. FedEx Cup coming up this week, right? That tournament in Greensboro over the weekend, the last chance to qualify. And the judge ruling that, no, these guys knew what they were doing when they signed their Live Series contracts. They knew the monetary hit they would take, and they were compensated accordingly. And so there's no temporary injunction to the PGA Tour's ruling that these guys can't play. And the actual, the full case, the first chance it will have a chance, the first time it will have a chance to be heard in court, September 2023. So we're not going to hear about this mess anytime soon, if at all again. I thought it was interesting. I mean, the chance to have the PGA Tour kind of cut out real quick was there yesterday in the courtroom, but the judge siding with those lawyers and that institution, that is a big win for the PGA Tour for sure. In the short term, we'll see how it works out in the long term as that whole drama continues to play out on the golf course. But college football dominates our conversation, and I can't wait until 7 o'clock tonight. And to be honest, it probably won't be watched at 7 o'clock at my house, because 7 o'clock these days, 9, 7, and 2-year-old, is pretty chaotic at my house. It is fighting kids to get in the bath / shower / clean up their rooms. And the argument between, all right, well, let's play a family game or some cards or watch a show or watch a game. Or don't think this is going to be the family viewing, having not seen it before. I would imagine Shane Beamer and company keeping it pretty clean, and that's how this will be presented, but you never know. So I'm not going to make it family viewing tonight yet. I'm not quite to that level. Maybe if it was just my 9-year-old, we would do it, and then who knows the chaos going on. So probably won't get to this thing till about 9 or so after we get all those characters settled. But really looking forward to seeing how it's done. ESPNU, 7 o'clock tonight. If you're like me, set the DVR. There are going to be 5 of these episodes. Basically how I think we all expect it to be, the college version of HBO's Hard Knocks, which has aired, and I've seen some clips. I think last night was the first one. Detroit Lions, this year's team. Oh, the NFL's got a gem on their hands. You knew this was coming, right? With their coach who took over, former player, Dan Campbell, just talking about biting kneecaps off. And there have been a lot of aggressive coaches, a lot of former players. I don't know if they, let's put it this way. I would put Dan Campbell right up there against anybody. I'm thinking like Mike Ditka comes to mind. I mean, there are plenty of aggressive coaches. Vince Lombardi was kind of famously aggressive in his own way. He was a former offensive lineman. What part of I forget the 4 pillars or whatever it was when he played at Fordham. But Dan Campbell, legit NFL guy. You got Mike Vrabel now. Is probably right up there with guys who had plenty of playing experience and take that player's aggressive mentality as a head coach. But the Lions, you had Jamal Williams, I think it was, breaking them down all emotionally. A social media clip going crazy yesterday. And then Aiden Hutchinson. The rookie talent shows are fantastic. And it's not just NFL. I guess maybe college football kind of stole that from the NFL. That's always been part of the fun of Hard Knocks. How do NFL teams treat their rookies? What do they make them do? Typically, it's a talent show, and guys got to go a cappella, sing a song is the traditional deal. Well, Aiden Hutchinson, the big defensive lineman from Michigan, going Billie Jean, and just completely a fan favorite. Have you seen this Duke kid? The lineman from Duke went opera. If you haven't seen either one of those, I definitely suggest you check it out on social media. Can't wait to hear what or see what Gamecock football has in store, because there's plenty of personality in that group. And it was on display yesterday. And like Craig mentioned, yep, Chris, ESPNU, you got it, 7 o'clock tonight. So Craig mentioned, I guess, the Little Turbo nickname for Dante Miller, transfer tailback in from Columbia. He's already graduated from the Ivy League. I guess his coach, one of his, I think his college coach gave him that one. And I think that's a movie, right, where the snail ends up racing the whole thing. My kids have seen that one. I think I've watched some of that, or it's been on at my house before. But he was talking yesterday, and yeah, really impressive young man, Craig says. The part he was talking about how the Gamecock coaching staff, Shane Beamer specifically, but the program treating them like men. That was the most impressive line that I heard. He said he's never seen it done like that before. How this coaching staff treats the players like men. And, that's always been one of the issues with college coaches going to the NFL. Urban Meyer comes to mind immediately, where Josh Allen, the star defensive lineman from Kentucky, now the Jacksonville Jaguars, asked the difference between this year's preseason camp and last year's. Like, oh, we're being treated like professionals. Basically, I translate to, we're being treated like men instead of like kids. And every head coach has got to kind of be themselves. You can't fake it. You can't be someone that you're not, right? So there's that out there. But the way that college football has been ruled by and large for so many years is by the iron fist, and got to instill discipline, toughness. And the only way to do that is kind of like the drill sergeant type mentality, right? Or I guess there are a few exceptions that come to mind, like Bobby Bowden's not necessarily that type, but the Nick Saban kind of model, right? That you gotta you fall in line, you become like us, not we don't become like you, and you got to earn your playing time, get in there, and be the baddest guy we got at that position, as opposed to, hey man, we respect you as a man, and we're going to make you a better person at large. And this program, one of the foundational aspects is love. That's what Gamecock football presents these days. And Dante Miller talking a little bit about that, but his comment kind of was a little peek into the window of the culture of Gamecock football headed into year 2 in Shane Beamer. On the field, a couple of wide receivers talking yesterday, Xavier Legette and Amarion Brown. And I don't know if I've seen a position group. I mean, I guess this is just what it's going to be in college football now, because we're talking about a guy in Dante Miller who transferred in, Christian Beal-Smith, transfer from Wake Forest, also adding instant depth to a running back position that saw a couple of guys, the two top leading rushers from last year, Saquandre White, Kevin Harris, move on to professional football careers. But you had a guy like Juju McDowell, very productive last year, and a guy like Marshawn Lloyd. The preseason storyline is he looks a lot more like the guy that was getting ready to burst on the scene in 2020 as a true freshman than the guy that was coming off the major knee injury last year. So the running back room has undergone kind of a significant change, but compared last year to this year, seems like you got a bunch of pretty good options. This time last year, Gamecock wide receivers, Gamecock quarterbacks, you could say the very same thing, right? I mean, it was Scott Van Pelt and Stanford Steve on their podcast yesterday. I mean, laughing it up about the Zeb Nolan storyline. It was an overall positive conversation about South Carolina. I think the question was just posed by Scott Van Pelt, like who you like this year, who might be under the radar. and this is from more of the wagering perspective. Who do you think you make some money off of in college football this year? And Stanford Steve was going South Carolina. I mean, last year they had a coach popped in and they're saying that, making fun of Zeb Nolan, saying that the helmet didn't even fit because he hadn't been working out. So from a national perspective, it was kind of a hilarious story. I get that for sure. That put Gamecock football on the map, especially early on in the year last year. So that was a quarterback situation, especially after Luke Doty went down with an injury, and Doty wasn't experienced, proven, anywhere close headed into his second season. Then you had Jason Brown, a transfer in there, and I know there's some people who have hit me up. At least one has hit me up and like, "Hey, why isn't he getting any credit? Have you seen his highlights?" Well, he did have some great moments, no doubt. The Florida game was fantastic. The great story, transferred up from St. Francis, but the more playing time, there was a reason that Zeb Nolan got the nod over Jason Brown. There's a reason that Zeb Nolan became the starting quarterback. The coaches trusted him to make the decisions, to make the reads, how they needed that offense to be run, and they trusted him more over Jason Brown, and that was that, combined with Spencer Rattler transferring into the program, was the reason why Jason Brown transferred out. But now he's at Virginia Tech, I think in line to maybe get some playing time up there, maybe be their starting quarterback. So I think everybody that was around the Gamecock program liked and certainly appreciated what Jason Brown did for the program. Wishing him luck moving on. That's just what college football is now, right? Lane Kiffin was talking yesterday. Here's where we are. Here's where college football is. We had a couple of guys battling for a ball. One guy just transferred from Auburn. The other one transferred from Mississippi State. I think the guy on defense was from Auburn and the wide receiver was from Mississippi State at Ole Miss this year. And that goes right to the wide receiver breakdown this year for Gamecock football. Hope, good morning to you as well. Chris saying he's looking forward to seeing more Juju. I was shocked how much we saw of him last year as a true freshman and at his size, but he just is a dynamic player, and I think his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield gives the offense a lot more versatility. And again, last year's offense, they didn't have a proven wide receiver. Didn't have a single one going into the season. Josh Vann stepped up and became that guy. But outside of him, there wasn't much. This year, you throw in the fact that Amarion Brown is coming off his best game, and he was talking yesterday about the confidence boost the Duke's Mayo Bowl gave him. I think he ended up with 4 catches, 60 yards, right around there. Also might have had a carry or two. And I think it's still thought to be the fastest guy on the team, going to contribute in any way he can, he said. Special teams, gunner, and cover guy, the whole thing. But he's still way down there on the depth, on the pecking order, it seems, having listened to Justin Stepp at Media Day the other day. So you got Josh Vann, the proven guy. And this is just me from the outside looking in, but also talking about Corey Rucker, transfer from Arkansas State, on the Bolitnikoff Award watch list this year. And maybe not even the most hyped transfer wide receiver in with Juice Wells from James Madison. Proven guy. Now you had E.J. Jenkins this time last year that maybe a lot of Gamecock fans were talking about and saying, can't wait to throw it up to a 6'7" monster out there on the outside. And I get the idea, but that one was always an idea, was much better looking, much more. It just hadn't happened to that point. Morning to you too, Trey. Thanks for hopping in here. Talking some Gamecock wide receivers, breaking down that position today. But the likelihood of him not having been a dominant wide receiver in his career to that point at Division II school, coming to an SEC school and becoming a dominant guy, physically dominant, yes, but There's a reason why there are not a lot of 6'7" wide receivers running around in the NFL. It's a difficult thing to do, man. And so from last year to this year, fast forward to this year, Xavier Legette was a guy who was in the mix last year, never took that next step, really, earned some playing time towards the end of the year, and had a pretty promising freshman season the year before, but he was a guy who didn't take the next step. And a guy who is on the depth chart this year is getting some good reviews for sure. Dakereon Joyner, never a guy who turned into a consistently productive wide receiver last year. Again, another guy in the mix now. But it's those two transfer guys that really, I think, help change the perception of this receiver room. And they come in with a more proven track record than previous transfers. If you're yelling Jalen Brooks, I hear you. But coming from Division II Wingate, I believe. Been over at Tarleton State for a few weeks or months or whatever that was, and a situation to get him eligibility. But you looked at his college production, and then you say, all right, now he's going to be a guy you rely on at the SEC level. That didn't quite make much sense. But Rucker and Wells are different animals. They have a lot more proven production. And again, the fact that these other guys are already in place and they don't have to come in and be the guy. If Josh Vann hadn't done what he did last year, then I would say that the Gamecock wide receiver position is still a huge area of concern. But the fact that he did, and you have these other guys who have proven that they can be reliable options for sure, and now kind of earn their way. I see these guys as what we've seen in college basketball for multiple years. Frank Booker, an example from the Gamecocks, was at Florida Atlantic, but a good enough shooter to earn a transfer opportunity for Frank Martin in South Carolina, and came in and pretty good player. Obviously could play on the SEC level. We haven't seen it as much in football, but we're certainly starting to, where guys, mid-major guys, lower tier schools, they play well there. They're looking for their shot to play with the big boys and prove it. Trey, great stuff. Do we have any concern that there is too much depth at this position? Not a complaint. Just wonder how you prevent lack of rhythm from being an issue. Well, that's a pretty simple one, right? The best guys are going to play. And whereas if it was this time last year and a kid was coming in like Landon Sampson with his high school resume, you'd say that guy's going to get on the field. He's got to. He's going to get his chance. This year, you say, yeah, good luck. You might be 9th or 10th on that depth chart right now at wide receiver. You got to figure out how to get on the field from a special team standpoint. You have to earn your reps in practice, and you get to watch more productive guys do it much more consistently, and you get to develop, which is one of the main reasons that Gamecock football has been down in the SEC as far as they've been down in the last several years. Offensively, maybe it's different on defense. Maybe there's a different mentality you have to have, that you don't need as much seasoning, or maybe there are not as many reads you have to make. It's more of a react as opposed to a read situation. Maybe that was the mentality that Will Muschamp took into his job. Maybe it's one of the reasons why his offensive struggled so mightily. Oh, we got to talk about Muschamp, by the way. Did you guys see on August 9th, 2022, the first time Will Muschamp has stood in front of a camera and made noises out of his mouth into a microphone since he was fired at the University of South Carolina? Almost 2 years before. It's crazy. It's wild. And talking about how he thinks he's got the best. He was telling his wife he's got the best job in the country now. I think the title is co-offensive coordinator, but he's running Kirby's defense. Kirby Smart's probably really running it, but they are running it in conjunction there. He's in charge of the defense now after being an analyst this time last year and then being called into on-field duty. Maybe it was right about this time, a couple of weeks into preseason camp last year. What'd you think? It turned into a bit of a Will Muschamp hate fest from Gamecock fans on Twitter yesterday. To me, it's just the fact that you are in charge of a program. Clearly, it didn't work out, but didn't even bother to thank anyone, to apologize to anyone, or take responsibility on your way out as you were getting, $12, $14 million, whatever it was. That's, to me, kind of the ultimate bad taste in the mouth at the end of the Will Muschamp era. And don't get me wrong. I don't think it was all on Will Muschamp, but when you're the head coach, especially as a college head coach, and you're preaching everything you're preaching to developing men about responsibility, accountability, discipline, dedication, hard work, all of that, resiliency in the face of adversity, and you get fired, you have to move on. Well, I mean, it is just standard operation from professionals, not just guys making millions and millions of dollars, that you put out a statement and you thank everyone for their hard work. You're appreciative of the opportunity. You say you'll value the memories and the whole thing that were made, and that maybe highlight some good moments, especially, or some specific people, some special people in the process. It's a very standard operating procedure there. Didn't even do that. I mean, most of the time, I don't even think these head coaches write these things, right? This is a staff member, and just say, hit these notes. You connect the dots. I'll sign it. We'll put it out. It's the least you can do, right? To look like a professional on your way out. Well, Muschamp didn't do that. Didn't even do that. The first time he's speaking publicly yesterday on August 9th, 2022. So we'll get to more of that in a second. Wanted to get DC's comment here. He said, rewatch the Florida game from last year. Van looked amazing in that game. I don't know if it's more Florida that just didn't show up or what, but he looked good. Well, that's the one that was the joke on social media, how open Josh Van was in the end zone for one of those touchdowns. I think that was all. Yeah, you got to give Van credit. You got to give Jason Brown credit. 2021 South Carolina and Florida is a great example of why college football is the best. It's the best. Florida's a double-digit favorite. South Carolina, again, Shane Beamer to that point is not the Shane Beamer that we've been talking about here in the last 8 months since the bowl game. It was a different vibe around the Gamecock football program. Very much on the, I don't know if this is going to work out. This is not looking great, man. Let's look it up. To that point, I can't wait to look this up. Thanks for bringing this up, DC. So Gamecock football in 2021. Yeah, let's get those results up. I want to see the exact date that was and what had happened to that point. So Florida happened last year. Okay, this was all the way November 10th. That's what I'm reading here. Let me double check, make sure I got. Oh no, 2001. What a dummy! I thought that was off. Glad I didn't go completely down that rabbit hole and give you all kind of erroneous information. Why would 2001 pop up? I guess I was looking that up maybe the other day to make sure I had my Phil Petty stats correct. 2021 results. Put that in there. It was a night game. I know Jason Brown was the starting quarterback there, and it turned into an absolute blowout for Carolina. But the Gamecocks were coming off an absolute blowout loss at Texas A&M by 30. They had beaten Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was the last win by a point, right? And we all remember, if you watch that game at all, you know how fortunate Carolina was. So I'm glad I'm going back and looking at this now. November 6th, first game of November last year, coming off a bye week where Carolina was sitting on that 30-point loss at Texas A&M. Pretty uncompetitive, right? Before that was the Vanderbilt win by 1 point. Zeb Nolan had to come off the bench to do it. Before that was, I think, the low point, it's fair to say, in Shane Beamer's first year. Tennessee, that first half. The other first-year coach was making South Carolina's first-year coach look like they were in different leagues. If you would have told me at that point on October 9th that Shane Beamer and Josh Heupel were going to be co-winners of a Coach of the Year, first-year Coach of the Year award, Steve Spurrier Award, I would have lost a lot of money on that one. And before that, Carolina had not looked overly impressive, I think is a kind way to say it, in a 9-point win against Troy. So let's do the math. Got the easy win against Eastern Illinois in the season opener. Got the dramatic come-from-behind win against East Carolina on the road in week 2. So 2-0 before Georgia beat you by 27. Kentucky wins at Williams-Brice just by 6. So 2-2, and the Troy win, and then it's alternating wins and losses from there, right? That gets you to 6-6, but so the Gamecocks sitting at 4-4 against Florida, off the blowout loss, off a bye, being a double-digit underdog, and then that game happened, and it was absolutely incredible for so many different reasons. First of all, you got a guy in Jason Brown who looked like a Heisman Trophy quarterback that night. I mean, that will be unless really special things happen, that will be the game of Jason Brown's life. Unless some special things happen at Virginia Tech this year, and I'm pulling for him that does happen. That would be awesome. Just pulling up the stats right now. So let's get Van's stats specifically going. We've got receiving yards, 7 catches, 111 yards, and the touchdown for Josh Vann against Florida. And outside of that, the leading receiver for Carolina had 38 receiving yards. So let's see the stats for Jason Brown that night. Well, just 175 passing yards, a couple touchdowns, no interceptions. And the Gamecocks were able to run the ball real well with both Kevin Harris and Zaquandre White going over 100 yards. 128 for Harris, 111 for Zaquandre White. Emory Jones threw for 258, ran for just 26. I think that was one of the shockers there. Florida was unable to run the football, and that crushed them. And Carolina's defense was running around, playing well, and the whole thing. And man, what a night that was for South Carolina. And DC's exactly right. Van had and has some big shoes to fill following Brian Edwards. That was the thing, right? Brian Edwards had big shoes to fill after Shi Smith. Maybe that was opposite. I forget how that worked out. I think that's how that worked. You always got to be the next guy, right? Carolina didn't have that next guy stepping in. I didn't think Shi Smith was going to be a legit number one receiver in the SEC either. A couple of preseasons ago, he proved me wrong real quick. Josh Van was more surprising last year, especially knowing the guys that were getting him the ball. And Chris is asking, how is Florida's defense doing up until that game? Well, let's check out Florida's. Again, they were number 20 in the country coming in. Hard to believe for the team that finished under 500 now. They came in number 20 in the country last year. Dan Mullen still very much in control of the program. And then it all fell apart. They gave up 52 points the next week after the Gamecocks to Samford. They won at 70-52, but then went on to lose at Missouri, beat Florida State by a few points, but then lost to Central Florida in the bowl game. The defense to that point, concern in their last couple of games, but before then had been really good. Right? Remember, Florida almost beat Alabama last year. Again, what makes college football so great? South Carolina, Florida 2021. A Florida team that had almost beaten Alabama in week 3. 31-29, that final score. Then they thumped Tennessee next. They thumped Tennessee 38-14. How does a South Carolina team that got trounced by Tennessee turn around and blow out a Florida team? Again, the greatness of college football. The transitive property, no meaning, no bearing whatsoever. Florida had only given up 20 to Kentucky. They had shut out Vanderbilt, but then it got ugly mid-October, giving up 49 at LSU. Georgia scored 34, but Florida only scored 7 in the cocktail party. And that was the game before South Carolina. So at LSU, then the cocktail party, and then the Gamecocks. Really turned out to be the undoing for Dan Mullen. (2021) Florida and South Carolina. Man, college football is a great thing. And that goes right back to this wide receiver room. And maybe it does go a little bit hand in hand with the quarterback room, but that is just kind of one guy, right? That's Spencer Rattler. And he has the chance to change the perception of South Carolina football in a lot of ways. His own perception too, I think, in a lot of ways. But it's multiple guys from the wide receiver standpoint. And you can kind of throw Jaheim Bell in that mix as well. Like, yeah, you can list him at tight end. You can call him an H-back, whatever you want to do. When that guy catches the football and runs, he looks like a wide receiver to me. So you had him doing what he did in the bowl game. Like, to me, Austin Stogner is a tight end. Nick Muse is a tight end. Big fellas that when they catch the ball, they're looking to run over guys. They're not going to make a move and run by guys. Jaheim Bell can be that guy that can make a move and get by. He'll probably still run over guys. But when you're not going to catch him from behind, to me, that's more running back wide receiver thing than a tight end deal. I guess Jared Cook kind of changed my mind on that as well when he played at South Carolina. Obviously, been doing it in the NFL forever. But now to have guys to be excited about on the outside and guys to rely on. And what that competition does. Just to have the question from Trey, is there too much depth at that position? No such thing when it comes to college football wide receivers. Because if you're going to have a guy be the guy, he's going to rise above the other ones, and that's where it's going to go, right? Sidney Rice, South Carolina had good receivers back in Sidney Rice's day, but he was just so much better than the other options. He got so many balls thrown his way. Morning to you, sir, York. Talking some Gamecock football this morning, especially Carolina wide receivers, which has been by far my favorite position from Gamecock football through the years. Running back, a close second, I guess, or not a close second, would be in second. Growing up, big Harold Green fan, and how just exciting that position can be, how much we focus on that. But guys with the ball, man. Sterling Sharp was one of the first. Raynard Brown, I guess, would probably be the first Gamecock wide receiver I mentioned. I can remember that play of the year he had back in the day against Pitt, was it? If you guys haven't seen that, just go to YouTube right now if you're relatively younger. Gamecock fan, Raynard Brown. Play of the year, I think is all you got to do. Chris saying it's good to have depth. Van's going to get doubled up a lot this year. Yeah, I don't know if he is. I don't know if he's that guy. But that's the thing. And that was the massive concern for last year, right? Going into the season with very little proven production at wide receiver, including Josh Van. Somebody needed to step up and be the guy, but that was the thing. If they were going to do that, well, then the opposing defense, why wouldn't they just make the adjustment and shut down that guy, make the other ones beat you, and you're good to go? But Josh Van turned out to be good enough that obviously that wasn't that simple. I mean, the numbers against Florida, unless Florida was just dumb enough to say, hey, we think our guys are better, and we're just going to stick with man-to-man stuff, and you got to prove you can beat us time after time after time. 7 times you would think would have been a little too much. But that's why it's so encouraging, I think, for this year's wide receiver group for the Gamecocks. You can't have one guy there. It wasn't just Sidney Rice back in the day again. It was that the other guys were good enough to beat you had you focused all your attention on Sidney Rice. Alshon Jeffrey wasn't the only option for Steve Spurrier's best offenses, for sure. I mean, Demir Bird, Nick Jones, other guys that I remember as kind of deep threats or slot guys. Don't forget Torrey Gurley. I'll never forget that 2010 game against Georgia where Marcus Lattimore, SEC debut, and tremendous. I love telling the story. It's just the feel, I guess, I got being in the little visitors post-game press conference. It's a small room. And to call it a press conference, kind of hyped up. It's just a little podium. And I don't know, you probably can't fit more than 30 people in the room. But Mark Richt, just being talked about, asked about what he thought about the Gamecocks, and he's like, well, first of all, they got monsters outside as wide receivers. He was talking about Jeffrey and Torrey Gurley. And just kind of the feel you got in his voice, the respect. And then he was talking about how he thinks Marcus Lattimore is going to be one of the best to ever do it. Man, that was a dozen years ago from the Georgia head coach talking about the South Carolina offense. How things have changed in the last few years, huh? Unfortunately for the Gamecocks, certainly good for Georgia, but this year is different, and you got to give the recruiting effort, I think, a lot of the credit. Going into the transfer portal, a big help. Wells and Rucker, immediate guys you got to have. And was listening to Justin Stepp, his twin brother, Josh, coaching for Sean Elliott in Georgia State, which is kind of a nice subplot to the season opener. Those guys from Pelion High School, and saw Josh play a bunch in college when he transferred from Furman to Newberry and was their quarterback and set a bunch of records back in the day. Justin stayed at Furman. And then started, I think, his coaching career that way, and then ended up getting out to Texas and now then Arkansas, then back to Carolina with Shane Beamer. But Justin said he got a call from, or he was talking to his brother Josh after Georgia State had played Arkansas State last year. And his brother was telling him, man, that guy, they got a really good receiver. And it didn't even stick out to him when Corey Rucker popped up in the transfer portal. They go and look at him, see the numbers, see the tape, and he was consequently talking to his brother then and said, no, that was the guy I was telling you about, man. And so now it has translated into an SEC opportunity for a guy that was at Arkansas State being productive, an SEC opportunity for a guy at James Madison who was being productive, in Juice Wells. Pair them with a now proven number one wide receiver in Josh Vann. You got a speed guy in Amarion Brown who is coming off his most productive game, talking about how that added to his confidence, what he was able to do against North Carolina in the bowl game. Xavier Legette, who was talented enough to get on the field as a starter as a freshman in 2020, did not take the next step last year, but reportedly has upped his game. You got Dakereon Joyner as a guy who can do some things with the ball in his hands, but has never been a proven consistent receiver in his Carolina career, but adding more depth out there. Talented freshman in Landon Sampson, state of Texas, put up a bunch of yards and stats in his high school career. Good point, DC. Bruce Ellington, underrated, won us a few games, no doubt. Yeah, the Sterling Sharp to Robert Brooks back in the day. Troy, the resident Clemson fan, said those are my favorite two South Carolina receivers because they were both great Packers. It actually went the reverse for me, having grown up a Gamecock fan and then watching Sterling Sharp go to the NFL first, to the Green Bay Packers. I became a Packers fan with that, and Robert Brooks kept it going, and Brett Favre and company from there. Too many weapons this year for Van to get doubled, DC says. Well, it'll depend on the, obviously, down in distance and the situation, right? And we still have to pump the brakes a little bit. How effective can those transfer guys be? What level are they going to present? We've heard great things, right? But it is August. You typically hear good things about talented players, especially transfer guys that you might not have seen. They might be showing you something that a little different than you're used to. But you're going to be playing against other really talented guys as well. Other guys trying to prove themselves in the SEC. To me, as long as those guys can be exactly what you're saying, DC, good enough to where other teams feel like they can't ignore them. They can't just throw one guy out there and say, nope, we're going to be good. Our defense is good enough. We're taking our chances in the one-on-one matchup. As long as they're good enough to win their fair share of one-on-one matchups, the Gamecock offense has a chance to be much improved. If they're not going to do that, then it's not going to go well. Reminds me of Travaris Robinson talking about the J.C. Horn and Israel Mukwamu back in the day. Said, yeah, if these guys are going to play well, we're going to have a good defense, and if they don't, we won't. Ironically, they're two good players. But apparently they were asking them to be superhuman because this was a couple of years ago. The Gamecock defense wasn't good with them. So that's all part of it as well. Like what's the scheme, right? Can the offense find a rhythm? Because outside of that bowl game last year, it never seemed like they did. Even, I mean, looking at that Florida game, those stats aren't going to blow you away offensively, throwing for 175 yards. Now, a couple of guys running for more than 100 yards, yeah, that's pretty good. Let me see if I can get a total offense in that Florida game last year. But I'm just talking about strictly offensively. We know the numbers were in the hundreds last year. It wasn't pretty. 459 total yards last year for the Gamecocks against 340 from Florida. That's pretty good. You'll take that every time, especially against the 20th ranked team in the country. But that was much more the exception than the rule. Let's see if I can get the maybe yearly stats going. Yep. Check here. Nope, that just went for the individual game. So I'll get the yearly stats going. But the important part of that, not to get bogged down in numbers, is the Gamecocks towards the bottom in the SEC from mostly all offensive categories. And that was with Josh Vance having stepped up and really proving himself as a number one receiver option. So you got to add pieces there. When you're Shane Beamer, you're looking at recruiting, you're looking at the transfer portal, bang, Wells, Rucker, done. Developing guys under them. And again, Justin Stepp's got a tremendous reputation as a wide receivers coach. What happens this year with the wide receivers will go a long ways into advancing that reputation or keeping it kind of where it is now. If you don't see a big step, right? If these guys turn out to be more like other transfers we've seen, and the guys I mentioned, and Jalen Brooks is still there, by the way, another transfer who's got physical ability for sure, but hasn't turned that into production on the field. EJ Jenkins, again, the guy we were talking about last year at 6'7", and man, he's got his high school and I think he was middle school quarterback, his college quarterback, and Jason Brown. They got the connection. This is going to be fantastic, and they're going to do it in the SEC level. Well, that didn't really work out. Now Jenkins is at Georgia Tech, finishing up his career, and again, wishing him the best. And that would be awesome if he would be ultra productive in the ACC going on to the NFL. Maybe he does develop into that. Craig says any team going through football with 4 quarterbacks is going to have bad offensive stats. It's that simple. Don't disagree. That was something that Rick Sanford harped on when he was on the show. The Gamecocks' first round draft pick, saying that he told Shane Beamer, how do you win without a quarterback, man? And 4 quarterbacks is one thing, right? What was it, 7 for the Gamecocks back in that 1999 winless season, or the 1-10 season? Maybe it was the 2000 season. 7 different guys got significant snaps at quarterback. Injuries playing a big part, and then just trying to find guys who could do something. Yeah, for those guys to win as much as they did last year, and to do it like with Jason Brown doing it against Florida, is again a great example of the beauty of college football. Statistically, Van would have had a solid year last year without the implosion at the quarterback position. Yeah, I think statistically he still did have a relatively solid year. Go check those right now. Again, numbers relatively insignificant, much more going off the eye test. When South Carolina's offense had to have a big play, there was no doubt from the wide receiver position it was going to come from Josh Van. Very simply. It had to. Nobody else really did that last year. So looking up the stats now, I'm going to guess, especially because you said that, it's going to be in the 600-ish yards total receiving for Josh Van, which will not blow anyone away for sure. but I think the 679, 43 catches, 679 yards, averaging about 16 yards a catch with 5 touchdowns. So a little bit more than 50 yards per game is where Josh Vann was receiving. So I think your point there, DC, is that had the Gamecocks had a proven guy that got to develop much more consistency and play more, that the yards would be a lot closer to 1,000 as opposed to just under 700. But still, for that team last year to average more than 50 yards receiving per game, and you look at Josh Vann's, let's look at his stats before then, right? And this is where I was sitting last year and saying, how is this going to happen? What are they going to do? Because the numbers just weren't there. Oh, I didn't have to go very far in the numerical roster to get Vann at 6, right? There we go. So stats going into last year, where I get it if you're saying that the stats weren't going to blow you away, no doubt. So career stats receiving wise, he was coming off a year where he had 88 receiving yards, 10 catches. So this is where we were last year, right? And this is why after that Georgia game on the field, Will Muschamp goes up to Josh Vann's like, hey, where did that come from? Where was that? And Vann's like, well, it finally started getting me the ball. And it was kind of uncomfortable former coach and former player awkwardness there, and that was it. 10 catches, 88 yards in his third season at Carolina. Had not had 200 yards receiving in a season before then. 171 yards receiving in year 2 and 118 in year number 1. Yards per catch, averaging in the single digits. And so to basically double his career output to that point, I think it was, it looks like maybe close to 400 yards total in his 3 seasons at Carolina, to come up with only almost 700, 5 touchdowns. It was massive improvement. And now to have him paired with other guys who have proven, who have better numbers, and they should, right? You better have better numbers playing for Arkansas State and James Madison coming to South Carolina if you're projected to have any kind of impact. And that was my problem with the other transfers that had been in, E.J. Jenkins and Jalen Brooks. Their numbers at other stops hadn't been fantastic. And you got to have really fantastic numbers, I think, to have a great chance to succeed when you're moving up like that. Who's going to take over for Parker White, DC says. That's the position I'm most worried about. If you can't kick field goals, it's hard to win close games. DC, I would say at August 10th, if you're most worried about the place kicker, your college football team's in pretty good shape. That's a great place to be, man. And you might want to shift that to punter now that Kai Kroger's out with a foot injury. And he's been a really good player for several years. Parker White, the all-time career points leader at South Carolina. So you got a couple of guys battling it out there. And neither one will probably be what Parker White was, right? That how that guy's not getting an NFL job, I don't know, but that has always been a bit of a mystery for me. I think the leg strength has to be so incredible. Never forget Ryan Suckup, watching him for the first time in Williams-Brice Stadium when they used to let us in for preseason scrimmages. He and Josh Brown were warming up. This was Josh Brown's senior year. And it's one of those things that you hear baseball scouts talk about it, right? I think the legendary home run hitter from the Negro Leagues, Josh Gibson. I read one time where it just sounded different off his bat. You hear that's kind of the ultimate compliment for a hitter, right? Just sounds different when he hits it. That's what it was with Ryan Suckup from just a kicking standpoint. Never seen that before. But even at the time, it was clear Josh Brown was a good college kicker, right? The classic field goal in Knoxville to get Steve Spurrier and Carolina their first win at Tennessee in his first season. And good enough to kick ahead of Ryan Suckup that year. Just more consistent, more accurate, the whole thing. But the way that the ball just shot off his foot was just different. It was so obvious at that point. The leg strength was tremendous, and I guess that's the only knock on Parker White, but I always thought his leg strength was fantastic as well. It was just that Will Muschamp would run him out there for 50-plus yard field goals consistently. They wouldn't go in, and what that did to the team, the stadium, the fan base, was so demoralizing. Another great representation of Muschamp's decision-making and head coaching tenure, really. Every time there was a chance to move things forward, get people excited, seemed like it was deflated in some way. Chris, I'm pretty sure the foot injury is on the kicking foot, I would think. They're hopeful that he'll be back for the first game. Typically, when a head coach in August says that, I'm pretty skeptical that that's going to happen. And I would think if the injury was on the plant foot, it would not keep him out as long. But I don't know. I mean, never really heard of a kicker, a punter having the foot injury like that. York says, still hoping both lines produce. Everything on offense and defense starts and flows from the trenches. Yeah, I'd say that is a much larger area of concern or impact that South Carolina football, every college football team's going to have, right? You got to be solid. And I think we've seen it for South Carolina's perspective, especially in the last couple of years, both offensively and defensively. It's so demoralizing when you can't protect a quarterback who's already inexperienced or unproven. It's so demoralizing as a defense when the other team gets third and shorts consistently and can run it successfully. Doesn't have to do anything tricky. That sends a larger message as well. When it's third and short, you run the football and you get the first down. Just the fact that you made the play call says you had the confidence that your team was going to be able to push around the defense. From a defensive perspective, you had your big boys in there to guard against what just happened. You couldn't stop it. You knew it was coming. You couldn't stop it. How are you going to win the game? Chris says, don't really think we'll need a punter for the first game. Hope we don't. LOL. I'd pump the brakes on that one, man. Georgia State, I don't think it's going to be the cakewalk that you can give the punter the game off for. And I'll go back to even Eastern Illinois last year. Gamecocks get the ball first to start the season, 3-and-out. Eastern Illinois, one of the worst teams to come into Williams-Brice Stadium in its history. So there's still a lot involved, and there's a lot of room for the offense to grow. I'm not sure it has to go through the wide receivers while we're talking about them today. It has to rely on them a lot, though. They have to be much improved. Just have to be. And maybe you can argue an improved quarterback will help them look much more improved, maybe more so than the four guys who ended up throwing the football last year. That can be the case, right? But you got to make those plays. And I got to figure that Spencer Rattler is going to give the Gamecock wide receivers more opportunities to make more plays this year. I got to think with the offensive line having played more going into this season than they had last year, basically being the same guys, that they're going to give the offense consistently more time to make those plays, more chances. Yeah, I'm certainly not sold. I'm not sitting here telling you that a veteran offensive line, a more experienced offensive line is going to translate into one of the better offensive line in the SEC. I get frustrated with that conversation every single year, right? And the problem that you have talking about one college football team for the majority of the time, for the majority of the years, the year is, it's a little tunnel visioned. The same conversation goes on in the same way around every major college football team this time of year. And so, yeah, your guys are going to be improved. Yes, your guys are working hard. They're being asked to do a bunch of stuff and rising to those challenges internally. But you're not competing internally when it comes to the football season. How does that compare to the other team? How much have you improved compared to them? Or their positions improved compared to yours? So that's, again, another reason why I was impressed with Josh Vann last year, coming off of 3 years of very little production and going the opposite way that you want to go in your career, right? Had his best year as a sophomore in his second year, 19 catches, 171 yards, and then in his third season, regressed to basically half those catches and half that yardage. That's a massive regression. One that, from my standpoint, meant that he just didn't have the ability to be a number one guy. Counting on that this time last year, I thought was pretty ridiculous. And then he absolutely proved me wrong, went out and did it. And now that projects from me him to take another step, especially having other weapons around him. But we'll see. Again, part of the beauty of college football. How you see it on paper definitely doesn't translate. And going back to that Florida game from last year is a tremendous example. Craig asking, how tall is Tyshawn Wanamaker? He looks small compared to Jalen Nichols. Let's break down some offensive line numbers there. I got you. Got the roster pulled up right here. See if I can get you those offensive line guys. Again, to me, height has always been an overhyped statistic or measurement on the offensive line. To me, it's all about athleticism there, man. Jalen Nichols is massive at 6'5", 322. So a lot of guys are not going to look big compared to him. Tyshawn Wanamaker, who looks little, listed at 6'3", 308. I think you're pretty good there either way. Now, it's the backup linemen that look pretty impressive too. The freshman lineman and Grayson Maines at 6'5", 300. John Darius Morgan, a redshirt freshman at 6'3", 312. All these guys, just ridiculous to me as we go down the list. 6'3", 300 for Jackson Hall, the freshman. 6'6", 290, Mac Walters, freshman. Chase Swigert, 6'6", 305. Wyatt Campbell's the redshirt senior at 6'6", 310. Has struggled to get on the field, right? Hank Manos, another backup, 6'4", 303. So to me, how athletic are you? How good are you at doing what you got to do every single play? Yeah, the total weight average is ridiculous for starting offensive lines. And I think it might have actually shrunk here recently as strength programs and nutrition programs have gotten even better. And I think coaches have realized that it is much more important to be athletic, to be quick enough on the offensive line than it is to be just massive brute force, right? If you're relatively inanimate object, doesn't matter how big and strong you are if you can't get your hands on somebody. So from that standpoint, I think the Gamecocks go in fine. I'd say C+ right now is where I see that. I don't know if you could have the wide receiver group rated much better than that either. I'd say that's where I would put them right now as well. I'd give, I think, the running back group probably the same. I think you got to give the quarterbacks a B based off of Spencer Rattler's production and Luke Doty's potential as a backup quarterback, to carry on Joyner, what he's done in some stints at quarterback. You got a guy in Colton Gauthier. He's got some tools and seemingly another guy in the room added to the mix, a couple of talented freshmen. So I think you have to give that one a B. Tight ends, I think you got to give a solid B, if not an A, going in with Jaheim Bell and Austin Stogner. So a lot to prove still in this conversation with the wide receivers. I don't mean to say that I think South Carolina's wide receivers right now are amongst the best in the SEC. I think it's far from it. I'm giving them a C+. They seem to be slightly better than average, with Josh Vann having proven what he did, and then the transfers, the potential of the transfers, potential of guys that have been in the program like Jalen Brooks, Xavier Legette, to carry on Joyner. They have experience. They should know what is expected of them in the offense in year number 2 under Marcus Satterfield. First time they've had the consistency at offensive coordinator in 3 years, right? It's been 3 offensive coordinators in the last 3 years, with Will Muschamp moving from Kurt Roper to Mike Bobo, and then Bobo only being there for a year, deciding to go to Auburn, and Marcus Satterfield coming in. So you should see improved consistency from the wide receiver position, from every position on the offense. But still a lot to prove there, and nowhere near some of these wide receiver groups that we've seen in South Carolina history. Going back to Sterling Sharp, I mean, my guy at the time, I loved Ryan Bethea as well. I see number 2 out there, Sterling Sharp, and number 1, and Ryan Bethea. Oh, so fun to watch. Then Robert Brooks coming in, tremendous. Trying to think some after that. Toby Cates. There are a bunch of names that I'm sure I'm overlooking. Feel free to shout at me in the live chat with other names of really good Gamecock receivers through the years. It was Troy Williamson in the Lou Holtz era, Brian Scott, good players. Trying to think of other old names that I'm missing. Yeah, then you get to the Kenny McKinley, Sidney Rice, Kenny McKinley, Alshon Jeffrey, Torrey Gurley, Demir Bird, Nick Jones, Ace Sanders, Bruce Ellington. Go down the list, right? But that's what you got to have. And that's especially what Steve Spurrier was known for. If you're a wide receiver, why wouldn't you come play for Steve Spurrier? That's when he could have that recruiting mindset of, yeah, all right, you don't want to come, we'll get another guy. Wide receivers, easy to recruit for Steve Spurrier. The fact that continued in the Will Muschamp era, right? Well, Spurrier had Deebo Samuel, who was always hurt for him. I skipped over Pharaoh Cooper in there. My bad on that one. But then it was going to be Deebo Samuel next in line, struggling with injuries. Brian Edwards had to step in and be the guy. And you had Deebo, Brian Edwards, Shi Smith all together. Shaq Rowland was a tremendously talented guy, and DC saying a waste of talent. Yeah, what I saw, I think on social media, about my buddy Mike Gillespie put up a long touchdown he scored against North Carolina in that season opener that was at Williams-Brice a bunch of years ago now. Yeah, Zola Davis. My bad. Nice job, Roger. The old A to Z era with Anthony Wright to Zola Davis. Great one. But no, not quite wide receiver you. You're laughing at that one because that's what Clemson likes to say, maybe. And the run they've had of wide receivers is tremendous. But that's another great aspect of college football, right? Sitting here August 10th in 2021, looking at the disparity between the Clemson wide receivers and the South Carolina wide receivers. Man, I don't know if you could have had a position in college football that looked much different. I mean, maybe you could argue even the quarterbacks as well, right? With DJU's reputation going into last season being really high and it not being there for South Carolina. So maybe if you added those two together, massive disparity on paper going into last year. And again, not trying to convince you that South Carolina has made a massive national jump in a wide receiver conversation. They haven't. But at least they got one guy going into this year who did it in a South Carolina uniform last year in Josh Vann. They got several other guys who have been a part of the program who will not be counted on, it doesn't seem, to be those next best options. It seems like the transfer portal has solved that, at least on paper. And now those guys got to go out there and prove it, which is what you want. And you got a wide receiver coach in Justin Stepp, who does have a proven track record in the SEC at Arkansas. And before that, at SMU, with developing guys to high levels. So it's so much more promising going in this year. Now that gap closed significantly last year, but I think it closed a lot more because of Clemson coming down as opposed to South Carolina rising up with quarterbacks and wide receivers. But then that was just based off of last year's production. Now you add in Spencer Rattler to the quarterback conversation and the transfers into the wide receivers conversation for the Gamecocks, and I think that gap significantly smaller. Maybe now a great time to play a clip from Rick Sanford, who I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, talking about where he sees the overall gap between the two Carolina rivals. Plenty more program to come here. Appreciate you guys being a part of it. This was, again, Rick Sanford hopping on unrestricted free agent not too long ago, talking about Carolina and Clemson football.
I think South Carolina's catching Clemson. I really do. I think, this team, and I've said this to other people, I think South Carolina, this is going to be a much more competitive game with Clemson this year. I'll be very, very surprised if Clemson runs away with this game against South Carolina. I think the talent level's getting better at South Carolina, and when you've got a quarterback that can play, you've got a chance. And I think that's the one thing that Spencer offers them. And this might be the first year in a long, long time that I think South Carolina's quarterback is better than Clemson's.
That. As we continue to roll on here, first wanted to tell you about Freedom Primary Care, who I trust with my family's health care, and suggest you give them a look, because right now the freedom to make your own medical choices is a thing in our country for multiple reasons. Never thought it would be. It has uniquely and significantly impacted me and my family, and it is at the top of my priority list when dealing with health care at this stage. And Freedom Primary Care, they put that freedom first for a reason. You have the freedom to decide where you take your health care lanes, let's say, what lanes you go down when it comes to health care. If you're looking for more natural minded solutions, they will give you that road of care. If you're looking for more traditional ones, they can go down that road as well. But again, you are in charge of your health care when it comes to Freedom Primary Care. 803-627-2447. Responsible to you, not responsible for you, is the line that I really identify with Freedom Primary Care. They're based in Fort Mill, South Carolina, not far from me. If you're not in the area, you can still give them a call. Check out the telemedicine options in the 21st century. You certainly don't have to be right around the corner from your Freedom Primary Caregiver, or your primary caregiver, I should say. I recommend you make it Freedom Primary Care. Appreciate you supporting those who support the program, and appreciate you being a part of the show. Especially those of you weighing in on the live chat right now, getting Gamecock football, the conversation going in a big way on August 10th, like you would imagine. And recently hearing some comments from Justin Stepp, wide receivers coach at Media Day, and hearing Amarion Brown, Xavier Legette talking yesterday just about the wide receiver room now. And again, preseason comments can be blown out of proportion for sure, and that's part of the deal, right? These guys who are in it, you can't blame them. It's all they know right now is their football preparation. From sun up to sundown. Classes still haven't started at Carolina yet, right? This is all football all the time for these guys, and it really has been in a lot of ways for the last several months. Shane Beamer, I think it was recently, talking about the improvement you got to make as a college football team in the summer, the dedication that takes. And you're going to hear that from all college football coaches all over the place. You're going to hear the type of things we're hearing from Gamecock football in a lot of different ways. The trick is to try to pick out, all right, what is just kind of a natural conversation that position groups are going to have this time of year. Every college football team is having this time of year. And then, all right, where are the outliers? Where are teams actually improving? I think maybe more importantly this time of year, the conversation, where are teams slipping? Or where is that team coming back to the pack? And that's where those comments from Rick are really interesting, right? It's impossible to deny the gap is getting smaller between Clemson quarterback wide receivers and Carolina quarterback wide receivers. But that was a massive gap this time last year. And again, Carolina didn't go a whole lot forward. They didn't make a whole lot of progress last year at either position, quarterback or wide receiver. Let's be very clear. If we're ranking power rankings 1 through 131 in college football, South Carolina in the top half of those categories? I don't think so. But Clemson had been pretty much number one. If not number one, not outside the top 5 in that combination category, right? Quarterback, wide receivers. But last year they looked, they came down a long ways, right? It was a bad year. And Carolina, while they could have been projected this time last year to be in the hundreds. I mean, that's where Pro Football Focus list had Luke Doty at like 105 quarterback rankings. I think if they did wide receiver rankings, I don't know how South Carolina could have been higher than that, with Josh Vann having coming off a double-digit yardage season. What was it again? I got to look that up again because it sounds ridiculous to say. As I'm thinking about it in my brain wants to stop my mouth from saying it. But the stats for Josh Vann going into last season, the year before, 10 catches. Scrolling down now for 88 yards. That's it. And we read out his stats for the Florida game only. It was 7 catches for 117? It's crazy. But outside of Josh Vann last year, not a lot of other guys stepping up. Amarion Brown, a good bowl game. He was thought to be going into last year, this time last year, he was certainly in the conversation as well. I left him out of that transfer discussion, right? Jalen Brooks, he didn't transfer in immediately last year, but it took him a while to get eligible the year before. Maybe you're thinking that's why it hadn't panned out yet. And he could take the next step. Physically talented guy, was going to be relied on a lot, was the conversation this time last year. EJ Jenkins, 6'7", another option. Boy, that's exciting from a fan perspective. Just throw it up to him in the red zone, right? Well, Jenkins and Brooks weren't very productive last year. Let's look up their numbers too while we're on it. I'm gonna guess. Let's see. I was in the hundreds. I was in the right hundreds for 670 some receiving yards for my guess on Josh Vann. I'm gonna guess these guys. I don't think Jalen Brooks got to 100 plus yards, and I'm guessing EJ Jenkins maybe just got above it. Let's check those receiving stats from last year. It's a fun game to play. You guys feel free to put your guess out there as well. And I did look up the receiving stats before, but I didn't get that far down. So, nope, I was wrong. Jalen Brooks did and did have more receiving yards. Both of them, though, in the 100 to 200 range. Jalen Brooks, 14 catches, 181 yards. EJ Jenkins, 8 catches, 104 yards. And those were Dakereon Joyner with 24 catches and 221 yards. So it went in order of production last year. Josh Vann, number one receiver, 43 catches, 679 yards, 5 touchdowns. So leading the Gamecocks in all 3 of those categories. Total catches, total yards, touchdown catches. Jaheim Bell tied him with touchdown catches with 5. And then about 200 yards behind him from a receiving yardage perspective at 497 and 13 fewer catches with 30. Then it was Nick Muse, the other tight end, the third leading receiver, then Dakereon Joyner, then Zaquandre White as a running back. So then Jalen Brooks and EJ Jenkins, Amarion Brown, all with more than 100 yards receiving, but that's it. Xavier Legette, if you're wondering, 8 catches last year, 63 yards, very similar stats to what Josh Vann had previously going into last year, the year going into last year. It's a pretty fascinating look at the numbers there when it comes to offensive or receiving production. And I'm a production guy, man. I'll go production over projection any time when it comes to having a meaningful college football discussion. Production trumps projection every time from my perspective to keep the P's going. So, DC, Nick Muse just with did he even end up with 2? I know he had 1 and celebrated. Yeah, he just had 2 touchdown catches last year. Josh Vann with 5, Jaheim Bell with 5. So those numbers that we just read out, you can't. So I guess now having read those numbers, I guess because of the numbers being much better for Juice Wells and Corey Rucker coming in, being added to the mix, and I think because of the quarterback issues of last year, that's why I'm going to give that wide receiver group a C+ going into this season. It's the only reason they deserve the plus. So you're looking at those numbers, you go off those numbers, and you compare those to other college football wide receiver groups, it is not going to be in the plus category in any kind of way. Probably be D or F grades, right? But us knowing the situation specifically for the South Carolina offense with the first-year coordinator, then the quarterback situation, Luke Doty injury, Zeb Nolan situation, Jason Brown popping in, then Dakereon Joyner in the bowl game. That's why I give the wide receivers a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. And again, the production from Josh Vann specifically. now being able to plug around him. And then, man, you reading those stats, you got to give Shane Beamer and company credit, because we know at the end of the day, it ain't about stats. It's about one stat, really, win or loss. And having being able to have done enough to have a 500 season, an above 500 season with the bowl win, massively impressive and important. But I would argue it's probably more important this year to keep momentum going than it was to gain momentum in year number one, because it just wasn't going to be that difficult to gain momentum off the end of the Will Muschamp era in a lot of ways, off of 2 wins. With the schedule you had the guaranteed win with Eastern Illinois to start. East Carolina wasn't very good. You should have beaten them on the road. Should have beaten them by more than a field goal. But you escaped that. You had Troy coming in. You're supposed to win that game when you're an SEC football team. You had Vanderbilt at home. You're supposed to win that game as an SEC football team, as a South Carolina football team. So that was 4 built-in wins that you really had to have. Carolina got those. Most 3 of those almost by the skin of their teeth, right? But then it was the other ones that turned last year's positive momentum into excitable momentum. And that's one thing for year number 1. Now in year number 2, okay, you had some things break your way. Can you continue to do that? Is that going to be the trend of the program, or is that going to even out? You got some guys into your program now that have raised expectations. I mean, going from Zeb Nolan to Spencer Rattler in a year's span is a pretty massive upgrade from the outside looking in, for sure. Is it going to be a massive upgrade on the field? Is he going to be able to make that many more plays? Is he going to be able to handle the scrutiny and everything that comes along with what he's bringing and the baggage he's bringing with him to South Carolina? And then those other guys out wide, are they going to be able to make plays for him? Are they going to have a connection? Have they been able to develop that? Rattler, having come to spring football, those wide receivers, having had time to create the rhythm, the connection necessary. Any idea, DC says, how many first-year head coaches at Carolina won a bowl game? Is Beamer the first? It's a good question. Trying to think just off the top of my head. Will Muschamp got to a bowl game, didn't win it. Steve Spurrier got to a bowl game. I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to figure out which one. I was thinking that was the Independence Bowl, where Carolina was absolutely rolling Missouri, but ended up losing that one. So I don't think he won a bowl game. Lou Holtz clearly didn't go to a bowl game. Brad Scott never did in his first year. So yes, off the top of my head, that is correct. Because Brad Scott was the first one to win a bowl game and didn't do it in his first season. So that's pretty easy. Didn't have to go back very far, unfortunately, for the Gamecocks. Didn't have to do that with many coaches. Roger, no, didn't win his first one. Didn't win it in his first season. I don't think, anyway. Pretty positive. That wasn't his first year, was it? Maybe it was. I'll go back and check. And maybe that was why he was throwing his hat there into the stands in Miami. Trying to think, that was 93, 94-ish, somewhere in there. So maybe that was the first year of Brad Scott. I'll go back and check real quick. Apologies if I got that one wrong, but I was just thinking that was a couple of years in. Might not have been. 7-5, CarQuest Bowl win. Yep, you're right, Roger. 94 season. So he becomes the second one. How about that, right? And so that's a great cautionary tale Brad Scott, first season, 7-5, bowl win. First ever bowl win for South Carolina. And I get it. If you weren't around there, especially if you weren't around Gamecock football, it is hard to explain what that meant to Gamecock football fans in 1994. I guess that was New Year's Day, 95. But having followed Gamecock football pretty much the decade before that as a kid, and seeing them go from independent to SEC football program, and then seeing a bowl win at the time against West Virginia, a team that had played. I like how you guys are going back and forth. Roger says in 94. No, it was 95. Oh, it was New Year's Day, 95. Easy, DC. Easy. Or it might have been a day or two after. I think I have the shirt, and it was New Year's Day. I was there. It was so massive at the time. And so to look back at those stats, I think is a great reminder, right? 7-5 in year number 1. 4-4 in the SEC. So that team was a game better. And again, that was back in the 11-game regular seasons instead of the 12. And then a bowl win. That was kind of a lot like that bowl win we just saw. Actually, less dominant. Let me see the final score there. It was a closer game, if I remember correctly. Let's see what we got. If you guys remember that off the top of your head, I'm really impressed or scared for you. 24-21, the final score. Carolina winning that one. But Don Nehlen, probably pretty close to Mac Brown at that time. I think fair reputation going in. Brad Scott, pretty close to the reputation of Shane Beamer, right? First-year head coach. The parallels are really kind of spooky. The MVP was South Carolina's quarterback that day, and Steve Tannehill, MVP of the Duke Mayo Bowl, a surprise quarterback for South Carolina into Kerryon Joyner, and kind of a part-time quarterback in that game. But a lot of similarities. It's now what will happen from there, right? Let's see. A bunch of you weighing in on this thing. Nice. York says, still have my Brad Scott autograph from my trip to the CarQuest Bowl. Good for you, sir. That was massive, DC says. Kind of went downhill after that from Roger. Impressive. Chris must have remembered the score just like that. So just to give you how it went after that, 4-6-1 was the next season, and the Gamecocks won 2 SEC games. So you look at this year's schedule, 2 SEC wins is very much a possibility. I mean, they just won 3 last year, right? Brad Scott never won more than 4, and I guess that's what it was. I'm trying to think with Lou Holtz's records. I guess South Carolina won. They had to win more than 4. They had to go 500. I think maybe it was never better than 5-3, I think is what the deal was in the Lou Holtz era before Steve Spurrier got to those 6-2 seasons. But 7-5 in year number 1, then 4-6-1 with the old tie back in the day in 95 season, 6-5 in 96, 5-6 in 97, and then fell off the map there in 98 with 1-10. That makes me think I might have misspoke and gotten the 99 2000 season screwed up earlier with the 1-10 in 98 and the 0-11 in 99. Like to forget about those from the South Carolina perspective, as I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. Yeah, exactly, Roger. That is strange because usually year number 2 is when coaches have a bunch of success. That wasn't the case for Brad Scott, and it's not set up for either Josh Heupel or Shane Beamer, right? It's not set up to be that way coming off 7-win seasons. There's just not a lot of room to go, especially looking at the SEC West right now compared to the East. But one team you feel like there is going to be a second place finisher in the East this year. That was the thing at SEC Media Days, right? Who are you going to vote in there? Kentucky got the spot. It's Tennessee 3. Florida was 4. And then the Gamecocks 5. Mizzou 6. Vandy 7. Not a lot of room for significant improvement like there was at Tennessee and South Carolina last year. Going to have guys who haven't done it yet at South Carolina do it. The fact that they have done it at an Arkansas State and a James Madison and Corey Rucker and Juice Wells, respectively, has me thinking it's a much more realistic expectation for Gamecock fans to get good wide receiver play this year than it was last year. It just wasn't realistic. It didn't add up. But it didn't add up that Josh Vann was going to be a number one receiver and get close to 700 yards receiving after having 88 the year before. And that happened. So that's also why I love college football so much, man. You can't just use logic and reason. And the 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. So appreciate you guys being a part of the conversation today. A lot of Gamecock wide receiver talk. Again, a couple of those guys talking after practice yesterday. Getting, a relative steady stream now, I think is what we might get. But I guess we have recalibrated our expectations about preseason practice talk after the Will Muschamp era and not getting nearly as much as we did before. It is coming out in a different way now in 2022. And 7 o'clock tonight, ESPNU is where Gamecock fans will get solid 30 minutes, the first of 5 episodes. I guess it'll probably be 22 with commercials, right? But going to be able to get behind the scenes, the college football version or the SEC version. We'll see how close it can be to a Hard Knocks feel. If the Gamecocks get anywhere close to where the Lions have gotten in episode number 1, I think it'll be a huge success. But looking forward to talking about that with you tomorrow. We'll shift to another position group as well from Gamecock football. Try to get a more educated perspective in on the program with a guest. Chris, optimistic, says really think we'll either finish 2nd or 3rd in the East this year. Well, you know Tennessee saying that. You know Kentucky saying that. You know Florida fans are saying that as well. That math doesn't quite all work out for everybody. Again, part of what makes college football fun. Chris says, have a good one. Go Cox. Great show today from D.C. Thank you. Enjoyed the show as always from Roger. And thank you guys for helping to make it better. 8 to 10 every morning, live streaming. Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube is the video. Podbean is the audio-only version. And then you can check out the podcast versions video-wise automatically archived right after the show's done. The audio version goes out all over your podcast platforms everywhere. Please help spread the word if you can. Subscribe and like and comment and all that stuff. That'll do it for the August 10th edition, Unrestricted Free Agent.